I, I'm the chapter vice president and secretary, holding two hats right now, and I'll be hosting. Sharon Lamberton, who is our president, is behind the scenes. She's gonna be the admin today. We'll probably talk a little bit, and she will be taking any questions. We'll ask that you put in questions in chat. We'll follow them up at the end. And then, first of all, I want to welcome all our guests as well as our chapter members. Appreciate you all taking the time tonight to come and be with us. And wanted to have a little bit of a business meeting before we get started. We're currently working on, the board is working on programming for next year. And we'll be meeting in January to firm up the schedule. And if you have a suggested topic or speaker or event, please reach out through our email address and we'll look at that. I put the email address in the chat in case you don't have it or don't reply to the invitation for today, but it's there just so you know that that's it. And then the other piece is a reminder of next month's meeting. Our December meeting is our holiday virtual holiday gathering and recap. And we'll be collecting photos. Sharon has offered to put together a reel of our successes in our gardening and our native plants. So send those also to the email address. Well, I forgot what to say, but we'll look forward to that. It was fun last year. We talked about things that we were working on, and then this year we'll have photos. And now for tonight's program, Chris has been talking. Chris Migliaccio, did I get that right?
That's very good.
Is a photographer and professor emeritus at Miami-Dade College. And he will share his practical insights and beautiful images. I'm looking forward to the pictures that center on your developing garden in Henrico County. And after years of growing native in South Florida, you've moved to Central Virginia and you've got new gardening discoveries and along with a lot of new plants, I'm sure. Sharon, the chapter president, met Chris through the Virginia Native Plant Society swap group and invited him to join us this evening. So we're welcome. Happy to talk to you. And let's go ahead. Take the floor there, Chris.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you all for inviting me to join you tonight. So for the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to share some of my experiences from the past year and a half as a new Virginia native plant gardener. This presentation is being recorded. It'll be available on the Greater Virginia Wild Ones website soon, and it'll have both the images that you'll see as well as the audio. So you don't need to worry about taking any notes there. My contact information is on the last slide. So if we run out of time for questions or if you have any questions that come up down the road, you're welcome to email me and I'll be happy to respond back to you. And last, in May, this coming May 2024, our garden will be featured as one of the native plant gardens on the garden tour that is organized by Cheryl Smith from here in the Richmond area. And this is an activity. It's usually on a Saturday, and there will be gardens all over the Central Virginia area, and they'll be open to people to come and visit. Cheryl will be posting that information on the Virginia Native Plant Society website, or the Facebook group, and also the Plant Swap group, probably sometime in April once the dates are set up. So maybe I will see you in person then. So let's go ahead and get started. 22 months in the Garden of Weedin. All righty. So let's see, why am I not? There we go. So I grew up in New York, came to Miami in 1970 to go to school at the University of Miami, where I met Greg Ballinger, and then later his wife, Diane. After I graduated, I was a biology major, and after I graduated, I started teaching science in middle school, later moved on to high school. And then in 1987, I joined the faculty at Miami-Dade College. And I was there for 32 years. I taught environmental science and ecology, among a few other things. During those years, I was a Florida master gardener. I had a side business as a horticultural consultant, and I taught a variety of horticulture classes at Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden. And my spouse and I moved to Richmond in March of 2021, following our daughter and her family. So to give you a little bit of background about where I'm coming from and doing what I've been doing here in Virginia, I want to step back a little bit and tell you a little bit about what I did in Miami. My wife and I bought our house in 1978 in a residential area about 16 miles south of downtown Miami. And it was basically a 4-bedroom house on a 1/4 acre, and it was almost nothing but lawn. There were a few shrubs, a number of dead palms, a few trees, but all pretty much weedy things. And by the 40 years later, when we moved to Virginia, I had a beautiful forest-dominated oasis. The rest of my neighborhood was still pretty much grassy lawns with some palms and a few shrubs. But it was an interesting place to watch wildlife, because our garden really was a nexus, a center for birds and wildlife and mammals too. But one of the things that I learned fairly early on was that everything can change in a heartbeat when you live in a hurricane zone. This was the house the week we moved in, with its beautiful iconic dead Christmas palm in the front yard, grass that hadn't been mowed in months and months, crotons, and really not much of anything else. And by 1992, the summer of 92, this was that front yard, dominated by royal palms, many species, cycads, understory palms, coconuts. I even had a couple native cypress trees in my swale. And then things changed really quickly. Hurricane Andrew hit our area with winds of 172 miles an hour, sustained winds with higher gusts, and the garden was pretty much devastated. A few things, we were able to prop up some of the palms. We cut back trees, we hauled and hauled and hauled for weeks. This is the front yard from the roof of my neighbor's house. Of 7 royal palms, all different species, only one, a Puerto Rican royal palm, survived and did not get blown down. But the good news was that none of them fell on the house. But nature is very resilient. And by the time we left in March of 2021, the garden had been rebuilt, again featuring palms as the canopies, lots of understory philodendrons of many different species growing epiphytically on the palms. And as I understand from my neighbors now, the grass has pretty much disappeared as these Brazilian philodendrons have taken over the swale. So I didn't have much grass to cut, which was wonderful. And this was the side view of the house. This is a kapok relative that I grew from seed that I collected in Costa Rica in '97. So that's 24 years of growth. Beautiful white flowers, and it's bat pollinated. The understory was a tropical oasis reminiscent of the conservatory at Lewis Ginter Botanic Garden. I had a shade house in the backyard for my orchid and bromeliad and aroid collection, a jacuzzi that we used when the weather got cold, that is below 70 degrees, and lots of display planted pots. So from that, we came to Virginia, and we found, after renting for about a year, we found this ranch-style house in the Henrico County area, not too far from Douglas Freeman High School, on a half an acre. And we saw it in January and really didn't quite know what to expect. Privet shrubs, abelia, shipka cherry laurel. There was a half-dead Japanese maple, a strip bed along the driveway that was mostly mulch, a couple of yucca plants, one island bed in the front yard that had pink oxalis and sedum autumn joy, and lots of grass. Then things changed in April. As the spring rolled in, all sorts of things began to pop up. Along the front of the house, hundreds of hostas, Siberian iris, the azaleas started to bloom. The pink oxalis grew dramatically, and Spanish bluebells popped up all over the beds. Daffodils, daylilies, the sedums greened up and started to form these lovely domes, but not a native plant to be found. There were crocuses, hyacinths, and what I call little bulby things that I'm not even sure what they are, were popping up in all the beds. In the backyard in January, we're on a little bit of a down slope, about a 2.5-foot drop between the fence line to the yard. So this is the terrace, we call it. Couldn't tell what was in there except for some oxalis, clumps of liriope, a couple clumps of Yucca filamentosa. That's the same one, Greg and Diane, that's in North Florida on the Lake Wales Ridge. Rhododendrons and azaleas, very nice. Foundation beds, but we didn't know what would be in them. And then, of course, the ever-present liriope and vinca, periwinkle through the backyard. The trees are oaks. We have white, red willow oaks. We have American holly, the native Alex opaca. We've got a sweet gum, several native species of rhododendron. I don't think I have any native azaleas, but I have cultivars, including some very old plant that are supposedly have been in the garden for 40 years. And lots of lawn. But in spring, the azaleas pop up and they come into flower, every shade from white through reds and pinks and corals and oranges, very, very showy. And now you see the bluebells, the daylilies are popping up. This back area was solid bluebells and daylilies. The daylilies are all one cultivar, kind of a yellow-orange, so there wasn't even a lot of variety there. And then the foundation plantings were all hostas, primarily one species. So as the new kid on the block, I had a number of challenges. First of all, what are the natives? What are the things that are non-native and problematic? What are the non-native plants that I could leave and not worry about them infesting the rest of the neighborhood? When do I do my trimming? What's the best time of year to plant? How do I transplant things so that they survive? Later on, I had to deal with leaf management, which up here is a huge issue. With all these trees deciduous except for the American holly, we're constantly dealing with massive amounts of leaves. I had to relearn how to use a lawnmower. I hadn't mowed a lawn in probably 25 years. So I got an electric mower, which was really wonderful to use, and it enables me to mulch right into the soil. But the biggest challenge I had was dealing with the exotics. There was just so much stuff to deal with. But the good news was that I have a small pickup truck. We have a great landfill nearby, about 30 minutes away, and they grind up plant material and they compost it. In other words, let it sit and cook for months at a time. And that enabled me to, every load I took to the dump, I'd come back with a load of the semi-composted mulch, and I used it to fill in the holes. As I took shrubs out, I preferred to take them out so I could use the planting holes down the road. I filled them back in with soil and then added leaf litter and more compost to the top of that. I spent a lot of time out in local parks to see native plants in their habitat. I bought books, I used online resources to discover what was available and what would be good things to put in my garden. And unlike in South Florida, where there wasn't a lot, I didn't do a lot of perennial gardening because of the habitat, the forest habitat that I was creating. Up here, perennials are huge. So there are literally hundreds and hundreds of different perennials that are available in nurseries if you shop around. So I wanted to incorporate those and not just have trees and shrubs. I'm fortunate to be retired, so I have time and I'm in good health. I love to work outside, the heat of summer, the cold of winter. I'm happy to just be outside. And of course, the Native Plant Society has a great network of people willing to share information. I posted countless pictures of what's this, and pretty soon got to learn how to recognize English ivy and vinca and distinguish between various species of native and non-native perennials. So I started to think out some garden goals. I wanted to maintain the existing azaleas and rhododendrons because they were just so showy in color. They covered a lot of space. We have a number of really attractive non-native perennials, many different cultivars of irises, both the bearded iris and the Siberian iris, quite a few peonies. There are some hellebores, several different color forms of daffodils, and of course the Spanish bluebells are really pretty. So I decided that rather than just letting them come up willy-nilly through my natives, because all of these non-natives tend to spread and get larger and larger in size, I would transplant them and give them their own space where they could just fight it out for dominance in the garden. And you'll see some pictures of that in a little bit. Removing the exotics, again, very, very high on the list of things to do. I also decided I would work to reduce the front lawn area by enlarging the existing bed and then adding some additional beds that would give me full sun planting, because it's the only part of the garden that's pretty much in full sun for all the day, every day. And I'm a plant collector. I like to have different species of groups of plants that I like. So my garden in Miami had over 100 different species of palms, probably close to 100 different species of aroids. So I wanted to see how could I increase biodiversity in my own neighborhood here? So as of November, I've put in close to 1,000 plants, ranging in size from quartz up to about 5 or 7 gallon material. And my species count now is edging on 300. And some things I put in this year for the first time, and we'll see how those make it through the winter into the spring, but I'm optimistic. And, there's always going to be some loss, some things that just don't make it, but we'll see. So part of the plan was, okay, inventory what I had. So I created an Excel spreadsheet that inventoried what was there. And it also inventories all the plants that I've purchased, where I purchased them, how much, what size they were when I put them in the ground, when did I plant them, and where. So I can pay attention to what I've got. I've also put tags in the ground for all the plants. You'll see those in some of the photos, mostly so I can know what the plants are. It'll be convenient if anybody else comes over to see them, but I can learn how to differentiate between the multiple species of mountain mints and bee balms and Joe Pye weeds, eutropiums and eupatoriums, of which they're a little tricky to tell apart. So the one good thing, we didn't have much English ivy. There was a little bit creeping in from the neighbors. So I've been able to control that, and my neighbors are very happy for me to control that even on their side along the fence. So that hasn't been too bad to deal with. So this is the first year. So this would have been April 22. No, this is April 23. This is the Florida bed where we expanded to West Florida. Let's see, Greg and Diane, you're probably right around there, maybe-ish, sort of, maybe a little more to the center. And here's Lake Okeechobee. This is a ceramic pot that has Lobelia cardinalis, the beautiful red flowers, the hummingbirds swarm it. And this marker is where we were in Cutler Bay. Here's Everglades National Park. It was interesting for me to see. I planted a lot in October and November of the first year of 2022, and really didn't know what to expect, how many things would make it over the winter. And I didn't lose anything. Everything came up, and that was really cool to see. I acquired some driftwood. Actually, I cut down the almost dead Japanese maple and used the trunk and branches as a design feature in the garden. The birds like to perch on it, and it also helps support some of my very tall goldenrods. I acquired some other long pieces of branched pines and oaks from construction projects and trash piles in the neighborhood. I created an island planting around the one crepe myrtle that was in the yard. It was an existing tree. It had been cut to the ground by the previous neighbors, but was root suckering and coming up again. So I'll leave it there for a while. It gives me some nice color. And I transplanted a lot of the Spanish bluebells into this bed, along with daffodils and the pink wood sorrel. So I'll have pinks and blues and yellows and whites in the spring. I'll say more about this bed a little later. I discovered that the Department of Forestry has a great program of growing bare root material for homeowners. They have a huge field nursery out near Waynesboro. And so for about $2 or $3 a piece, you can buy bare root seedlings that are grown like row crops. And they have a machine that's a giant, it's like a giant spading fork. And they have raised beds, and the seedlings of these plants are put on these raised beds, and periodically on a rotational basis, the machine goes through, vibrates the soil, and the crews literally are walking behind the tractor, just pulling the seedlings out. They go into big storage boxes. Everything is dormant, so it's perfectly fine. And that was an interesting experience. I put about half of the material in the ground. Most of it did pretty well. And then the other half of the material I put into pots. I grew smooth sumac service berries. These are the service berries. This is very disappointing. This is a beautiful white flowering shrub to small tree. These were 6 to 8 inch long pieces. The ones I put in pots did much better than the ones I put in the ground. This is smooth sumac. These were the biggest pieces. They had about 18, 20 inches of wood above the roots, and those grew really well. Wild indigo bush, Amorpha fruticosa, is a beautiful native legume that has maroon and yellow-orange flowers. The ones in the ground were a little pokey. The ones I put in pots did much better. Here's a smooth sumac planted out at this height, and here it is 6 feet tall, going to the plant swap in October. Red mulberry tripled in size. The indigo bushes quadrupled in size. But I set up a small nursery area in my backyard. I brought some potting benches with me from Miami so I could work outside and have all my supplies and materials at hand. So part of the plan was to expand those existing beds in the front, relocate the nice exotics, redefine the existing beds with new timbers. Probably about 3/4 of the landscape timbers had been sitting on the ground for goodness knows how many years, and most were pretty rotted. I learned how to winter sow, which is an interesting thing. Very much foreign to me, that you would cold stratify seeds for a couple months, and I'm doing that right now. And then come January 15th, I will sow my native seeds into containers outside over the winter. And this is a raised vegetable garden bed that we put up, my worm composting bin. So last year I did a couple strategies. I did the milk jug strategy of cutting the milk jug in half, putting in soil. After the seeds were cold stratified, I sowed the seeds into milk jugs. And I had really good success with goldenrods, wild clematis, handful of other species, but they were difficult to get out of the milk jugs. So I did some other milk jugs a few weeks later, where I put little 2.5-inch pots inside the milk jug sitting on soil for insulation, and then sowed my seed in there. And those were a lot easier to manage later. I also bought some plastic domes and corresponding trays. These trays hold 32 small 2.5-inch pots, and it forms a nice little greenhouse that I can vent and manage moisture and light levels. I put them in my vegetable garden and then packed it full of leaves for insulation. And that was a much better strategy. So I'll be doing that again this year, no milk jugs, but I bought some Sterilite plastic totes at Home Depot, and I'm going to be putting pots of seeds into those. This year, I'm going to grow about 3 dozen natives, things that I'm going to use in the garden in a new project in the front yard, and have some things to swap. So the work this year has been removing the exotics, filling in natives, working in the southwest part of the garden to kind of reclaim a forested area, and doing beautification in the backyard. The first year was primarily front yard beautification, and now it's backyard beautification. This photo was from midsummer, so you can see that I have a nice dense planting, some big eupatoriums, blue-eyed or black-eyed Susans. In this bed, I've got 5 or 6 different species of milkweeds that bloom at different times of the year, including some white milkweeds. And I have very little weed control to deal with in here. The violets probably would be the weediest thing, the native species of violet, but I'm okay with their being in there. They bloom early in the spring and will provide some nectar for early pollinators. This is that same bed looking at it from the street side. This is the giant wild hyssop, Agastache hyssophifolia. That's about 10 feet tall. A really good plant for pollinators. Here you see one of the species of goldenrods down here. The crepe myrtle is just starting to bloom. This is one of the 2 native sennas. This is Senna marylandica. Yellow flowers, sickle-shaped pods. Last year, it was about half that size and was eaten to the ground by yellow sulfur caterpillars. This year, I did not see any caterpillars on it. So the plant put a lot of biomass on. It seeded quite heavily, and I'm growing this from seed so I can spread more of it around the yard. And then this bed here, I wanted to have a water garden feature. So I thought, okay, let's eliminate some more lawn, build a bed that I can feature some water plants. And I'll show some more pictures of that. This is an area that was all daylilies and was all replanted this year. This is smooth sumac. I'm hoping it's going to be manageable because it does tend to run. This is Shipka cherry laurel, a large non-native shrub. It's used a lot in landscaping here in Virginia because it forms a nice big barrier planting. But it has, in my world, it has no redeeming horticultural value whatsoever, and it was taking up about a 10 by 10 space of a prime landscape. So it has since been replaced. Original beds on the side of my house going from the driveway to the back, solid liriope on one side and hostas on the other. We relocated the hostas over to our daughter's house where they had pretty much nothing in their landscape. And I replaced that with 3 different species of milkweeds, Echinacea purpurea. Yes, I know it is not native to Virginia. Greg, this is and Diane, this is an ongoing battle up here because lots of people use it. Native nurseries sell it as being native to Virginia. It's not, but it's a great pollinator plant and it's really pretty. So tough luck. On this side, Anemone canadensis, several species of asters, including this cup plant, which has really interesting leaves that cup at the base. And it has small sunflower-like flowers. The driveway bed that was liriope and yuccas, I left one clump of yuccas. I've replaced this with native grasses, white muley grass, Papularis white cloud. It's a cultivar, and I think it originally came from Oklahoma. Muley grass is native to Virginia, the pink form, and I have lots of that. Blue-eyed grass, which is in South Florida, Citrincum is here. Lots of different eupatoriums. Panic grass, Panicum virgatum. I think that's in Florida, but it's not in South Florida. And then this area here going down to my ditch is a problematic area, and it's going to be part of my project work for this coming year. The backyard had a patio. I guess you could call that a patio. This is slabs of Buckingham slate laid on sand over black plastic and then edged with rotting landscape timber. So we pulled up all the slate, sold it, kept a few of the pieces, and then I brought in a cubic yard of gravel and pavers and built a patio. This was a project this past May. It was an interesting thing to do, and then landscaped around it with hostas. I've become a hosta collector, and the hostas are now in there and doing nicely, although they've pretty much died back for the winter. But you can see around them are, let's back up, around them lots of liriope that has since been removed. This is burning bush, Greg and Diane, the equivalent of a kind of a Brazilian pepper sort of thing. It's called burning bush because it turns bright red, like poinsettia red in the fall. So it's commonly used in the landscape as a barrier planting. Japanese holly here, burning bushes along the fence line, Euonymus japonica. I don't know what the common name for this is, but another big, just green shrub that is weedy, growing into the chain link fence. So all of that has since been removed. We'll see pictures of that in a minute. The back bed, all daylilies. So my strategy for removing the daylilies is on hands and knees with a spading fork to get in underneath it and then lever them out and then keep going back over the next 2 or 3 weeks, because each one of these daylilies has a little cormlet at the base or cormlets at the base, and they sprout up again. So you have to keep on dealing with those. Azalea, that's a purple azalea. This is a big native rhododendron. This is a very pretty lavender azalea. We kept those. So here the daylilies have been replaced. The edging has been renewed. And I use orange flags from Lowe's to mark locations of plants, because when I first started doing this, I would read that a plant has a 2-foot diameter. So I'd have to kind of figure out, okay, if that's 2 feet, where can I put the next thing next to it? So it became a whole lot easier when I got these orange flags and just started putting them down in the ground, moving them around. And I found I was much more effective and much more efficient and much more cost effective in getting the exact number of plants I needed for the space. This area I planted in, let me back up. This area I planted in October, and I left it fairly open. And then I'll do some additional add-ins in spring. Again, trying to get some different things that I don't have in any of the areas. This gets partial sun, gets morning sun till about noon, and then it's in very filtered light because I have a very high canopy of trees. This is the backyard upper terrace in a panorama view. I added some driftwood from the James River. Not so much as erosion control as to just provide some different visual interest. My veggie garden here with tomatoes, I put some steps in to make it easier for me and the dogs to go up and down. I have muley grass along the front, interspersed with tick seed, Coreopsis verticillata, a couple different cultivars of that, some big Joe Pye weed. I left a couple clumps of the yucca, which has beautiful white flowers and is moth pollinated up here. This area is pretty much done, and I'll just let things fill in this next year. I mentioned the driftwood, and I'll show a couple other things here too. So I wanted to have that water garden in the front. So I went to the local tractor supply company and bought a wildlife feeding trough. It's about 5 feet long, 30 inches wide, about 1.5 feet deep. And I dug out a hole, and I was so happy here digging holes in Virginia. In Florida, we dug holes with cast iron pry bars, rental jackhammers from Home Depot. It was brutal, right? Greg and Diane.
Absolutely.
Oh, it was hard.
I only rented a jackhammer for a big hole, and Katrina or Wilman took that tree out, and all the trees I put in little holes survived.
Well, up here, I haven't hit a rock bigger than a golf ball. Knock on wood. So anyway.
That was a blessing here. I couldn't believe being able to just put a shovel in the soil and lift. It was remarkable.
It's amazing. So I dug it out, put a couple inches of sand, leveled it all out, added a drain to it, took some of the slates that I saved from the back patio and used that as an edging, and then use a Phlox subulata, the moss pink, a couple different cultivars of that. This is my big purchase, my $65 service berry. Shrub form, not a single trunk, because I wanted something big and bulky in that space, and I got granite blocks from Site One Landscaping so that it mirrors all the other beds in the front. And this summer I had buttonbush. Greg, they have buttonbush up here. Cardinal flower, Lobelia cardinalis, iris versicolor, blue flag that's out in the big cypress swamp, lizard tail, sorurus, and a pickerel weed in the back. Since that time, the buttonbush has been relocated into the ground, and I've spread the pots out a bit more. I got our one native species of cactus, Opuntia humifusa, here. And so I have a water garden. I had tadpoles, little frogs that I wasn't able to identify because they just were moving too quick at night, but they moved in on their own. So that was a nice surprise. To be able to grow native vines, I committed to putting passion vine, the same passion vine that's through the Southeast United States, Passiflora incarnata, on the chain link fence. And since this photo, I have added wire mesh to the wood fence, and now the passion vine is covering or beginning to cover the wood fence. So I will have a nice wall of 2 passion vines, both from different genetic stock, So I'm hoping to have a good chance of getting some fruit on that. And I built 2 vine towers. These T's are 4x4 posts with a 4-foot 2x4 on the top and then wire mesh around it. This one has coral honeysuckle vine, the native. And this one has Carolina jessamine, which is yellow in the spring, Clematis virginiana, the white virgin's bower in the summer, and the other species of passion flower, Passiflora lutea, which is a very, very small, very nondescript yellow flower. So those will occupy that space there. So what have I learned? What have been some of my big takeaways? Well, first of all, it was really important for me to get to learn the natives. So this Florida of the southeastern United States is really the Bible, so to speak, for finding out what's native. They have, it's a free PDF download. There's an app for it, and there's also a website where you can literally type in the name of a species, genus and species, and it'll give you distribution maps, its nativity, is it rare, common, uncommon, and where is it found geographically within the Southeast region. And what I've learned was having access to this is really important because it's very, very common in nurseries, particularly the larger commercial nursery, to sell plants as native. Well, what does that mean? I saw one beautiful, short, lovely yellow goldenrod, Solidago shortii, and I discovered, ooh, it's an endangered species. There's only one wild population of it in Kentucky. So I wasn't interested in that. I'm only interested in, well, primarily 97% interested in Virginia natives. So it's really important to have this access to you, like on your phone when you go to the nursery. So, and sometimes things do get mislabeled. I've had this happen at plant sales where plants were literally mislabeled. Somebody made an error at the nursery. I'm a big planner, and I ascribe to the idea of measuring twice and cutting once. I can't tell you how many times plans for a particular section of the garden have changed. As new ideas come up, I'll see a photograph of somebody's garden, I'll read something about plants or something that would be very good for that space. And one of the things that I did was I went systematically from one section of the garden at a time and tried to get, 3/4 of a bed or an area done at once rather than spreading myself too thin. And I found that worked out pretty well. I had to prioritize and reprioritize with plant sales here occurring primarily in the fall, and maybe a little bit less commonly in the spring. It was important for me to have planting areas ready for when the plants were going to become available. Because what I learned after the first year was that if I put things in the ground between June and September, I was going to be doing a lot of hand watering. Yeah, exactly. I learned big no-no, but I had to learn it the hard way, as I did a lot of hand watering. It's just too hot and it doesn't rain a lot in the summer, unlike South Florida, where the wintertime was dry and the summertime was wet. So you planned in the winter and planted in the summer. Okay, flip that one around. Lesson learned. But I made a shopping list and I update it on a regular basis. So I know what to look for, because early on, I saw lots of really cool things, and nurseries often sell things when they're in flower. And ooh, that's pretty. I'll take it home and then I'll figure out what to do with it. And that was a little problematic sometimes. So now it's targeted by planting area in the yard. And the good news is that a number of the nurseries here have online plant lists, and they keep them tied to their inventory. So if someone comes in and buys 100 of something, their inventory on the next iteration will show that there aren't 100 plants in the stock. So that's made it a little bit easier for me to plan in advance. But I've also learned that if there's something on the shopping list and I see it and it's on the list and I really want to have it, if I don't get it now, they might not carry it next week. And I learned that if I wanted dogwoods or if I wanted red buds, which are two beautiful native flowering trees here, the only time I'm going to see them at Home Depot or Lowe's is going to be in a narrow window in March and April. And then they're all gone. They don't carry them over the summer and the fall. And if you want to buy one, you're buying larger, much more expensive material at larger commercial nurseries. So it's been a learning process. As I said, I update the spreadsheet and keep it going. I've learned when the planting seasons are. I've learned the value of good tools. The number one tool I would recommend to any starting out or any gardener here in Virginia is an auger that you can put on your hammer drill. This came from Amazon. It's I think it's called a power planter, 3-inch diameter, and pretty much all my holes are dug with that. If I need a larger hole, I'll put 3 or 4, auger holes together and then break the walls out. The other indispensable tool is a spading fork. Probably not going to be using it so much this coming year because the liriape is pretty much all gone. This is my string trimmer for leaf shredding, and I do some leaf shredding and I use it as a top dressing. You can never have too many wood chips, and I've been fortunate to get 2 loads each of the past year. When I've had work done in my garden, the arborist who does my work will always leave me whatever's in the truck. So what's down the road? Okay, some fill-ins with the beds, but I want to say a little bit about the ditchscaping before we break for some Q&A. We have a ditch that runs along the front of the yard, and that's about a 75-foot run, maybe about a 90-foot run, excuse me. The north end of it is a gentle grade, which I can mow, but about 25 feet of it at the southernmost end is very steep-sided, narrow, and it's impossible for you to mow. If I want to keep things under control in here, I have to get in there with the weed eater. So gaining inspiration for what I've seen along roadsides and even in some native plantings, I'm going to ditchscape this area. I'm going to put some metal edging, about 24 feet of metal edging on the lawn side. I can mow on the street side pretty easily, and then there's a drop off. And then I'm going to plant the slopes. Obedient plant, bee balms, mountain mint. We'll probably put some short goldenrods in there. I'm still working on the planting list. And it's pretty rare that I have any standing water in here. If we get a very heavy rain like we're expected to get tomorrow, there will be some flow downhill. But my street slopes to this side of the street, and my neighbors over here all have asphalted or cemented in their ditches to control the water flow. So I don't have to worry about that. So I'm going to do something with this. The things I'm growing from seed this winter are primarily going to be for this ditchscaping project. And on the other side of my driveway, on the other side of the culvert, this is a creeping juniper. And the slope here is not so steep, but it's kind of a weedy thing, and lots of things volunteer in it. I get oaks and maples volunteering. I'm still pulling out daylilies and liriape. So I'm just going to bite the bullet, pull the whole thing out. I'll do some reinforcement, probably run some wire supported with rebar along the base, build this up a little bit with soil, and then I'm probably going to use moss pink, the Phlox subulata, in here. My big decision is, do I just plant it in one color form, one cultivar, because it comes from white to pink to red to candy stripe to blues to purples. I don't know what I'm going to do with this, so I'm open to suggestion. So that's going to be a spring. That's going to be a spring project. I'm again reducing the front lawn area. This is an 8-foot diameter sunflower circle. I've laid black plastic down over the grass. I'm piling dirt and mulch on this just to hold the plastic down. I'll put granite blocks around it for a circle. I'm gonna get some sunflower, the big mammoth sunflowers, as well as use about a half a dozen different native asters, everything yellow in this bed. And that'll be a nice big yellow mass. That'll be a spring project this year. The backyard woodland area, the ditch lilies and liriope have all since been removed. The Japanese holly is out, the burning bushes are out. So this area is now pretty much open to my neighbors. But my neighbors are happy because it was a bit too jungly for their tastes. Things were growing into the fence and being problematic. This is a native rhododendron, native azaleas, several different species. I'm starting to use carex, several species of carex, which is a native sedge. My fence line planting here is all hazelnuts. And I'm excited about that. The liriope here will be removed, and I will have a U-shaped bed here that encloses our granddaughter's fairy garden. And that's going to be hostas. I'm going to use that as an edging. So it visually ties into what's around the patio. So what have I learned? The process is continuous. And sometimes you just never know what's going to happen. Last spring, this spring, something started growing in this planter box around the tulip poplar. I didn't know what it was, but I figured, okay, let's let it grow. And it turned out to be Solidago altissima, the tall goldenrod, which is about 8 feet tall. And it's a beautiful plant. I've collected seed of it, we'll be growing it for some swaps, but it's overgrown the space. So once everything goes dormant in the winter, I'm going to cut it down and I'll transplant it out and fill the box with violets because the dogs can't trample and kill violets. And creating this kind of an outdoor space has given us a really nice area to sit at any time of the year. This time of the year, we sit under a rain of trees, of tree leaves, and the summertime, it's beautifully shaded and cool, and it's enabled us to appreciate all the hard work that's gone into it. So I'd like to thank a number of people. First of all, our realtors that got us into this house. They were so patient with us because we had some very, very specific things we were looking for. Cheryl Smith from the Plant Swap and the Garden Tour organizer. 2 nursery women of note who are just magnificent to deal with. Janet Davis up in Culpeper at Hill House. Ashley Moulton from Moulton Hot Natives in downtown Richmond. The Native Plant Society groups. John Wise, a former community college horticulture teacher here, local area. And of course, you all, the wild ones. So thank you so much for sharing this tour with us. We've got a little bit of time. So if anybody has some questions or comments, let's jump in. And here's my contact information. And I hope to see you in May.
All right, this is Sharon, and I'm jumping in from the chat. There was one question that got posted in the chat during the presentation, and that was about the rocky soil in South Florida and what makes it so difficult to dig there. And Greg jumped in and answered that it is, I don't know if I'll pronounce this right, oolithic limestone, which is called coral rock or coral soil. So Chris, you may want to add a comment about that.
Yeah, I mean, Greg and Diane's house was right on the limestone ridge. So they practically had no soil. I remember from digging some things at your house. I was on the east slope of that ridge where it goes down towards lower areas. So we had limestone clay, about anywhere from 6 to maybe 18 inches of limestone clay. And it was and everything in South Florida is compacted. When houses are built, to deal with drainage, generally limestone rock from rock quarries is brought in and then compacted with bulldozers. So impossible to deal with. We did not have anything like the soil here. 40 years of growing in our garden with mulch and wood chips and everything in the garden got chipped and mulched right back into the garden. It's a slow process. So Virginians are really fortunate. So when I hear about people complaining about their red clay, I can feel their pain.
There was a question about the little white bulby things. Laura, I'm scrolling, trying to, do they have white star-shaped flowers, the little bulby things?
Well, I know I have hyacinths. I know I have crocuses, and I'm cool with those. The hyacinths I've been removing from the island plantings in the front because I'm really trying to keep those just native. So I go around with a hori knife and I know I'm going to be digging those out for years. Lily of the Valley is one. There's a single bladed lily relative. I'm mental picture on this. I don't remember what the flowers are like. Oh, like little bells on a stalk.
Oh, yeah, that's snowdrops we call, or summer snow is what we call them.
Yeah, there was
remember
a
the
lot of
species.
that in the back terrace, that slope up, and I know I'm going to be removing that, just by hand, and that's okay. I don't mind doing that. That's a hori knife. Get in, lever them out before they flower. Wild onions, those little, they have little flower heads about the size of a nickel. Maybe single bladed leaves, cylindrical leaves. I know I'm going to be removing those. I don't think those are not the native nodding onion, which I don't have yet.
Yeah, no, I was asking if it was Star of Bethlehem because that's a huge pass along plant in the south, along with the summer snow. You can find beds of it that from probably the 50s that in your neighborhood was built.
That was our house was built in 50.
I fight Star of Bethlehem all the time.
Yeah, I know I'm going to be digging that up. The vinca is easier to deal with because you get the center, like you said, pull that out. But that spading fork underneath the liriope, anybody who's been over to my house to get plants or to swap stuff has been asking me how I've been dealing with that. And that is just, it's a hands and knees work, but I just peel the stuff up and, get in big masses, and it comes up. I shake soil out and then into bags, and I take it to the landfill in bags. It doesn't go into the regular yard waste. I don't want to be spreading that around.
Okay.
So it's been fun. So the garden tours will be probably middle of May. It'll be a Saturday in middle May. Last year there were 6 homes on the tour. There was Cheryl's house out in the Short Pump area. There were 3 up in Ashland, 3 down in Midlothian. So
Sharon was one of them.
Huh?
Yeah, Sharon had one of them. In Midlothian. She's in Midlothian. Her house was on the tour.
So I'm sure there will be more as people, Cheryl was hoping to get more, particularly in the central Richmond area, so people didn't have to travel so far. So I'm just hoping that it'll be late enough in the year that enough things will be up and out of the ground to be able to have something to show off. But the work goes on. It's fun.
Do we have time for one more question, perhaps? Perhaps? Hello?
Sure, I'll toss one in. What surprised me from coming from South Florida was how much more aggressive the weeds are here than they were in South Florida.
What are you battling?
A native called Bethany, but it wants to go everywhere.
Bethany, I don't know what. Do you know genus and species?
Diane might, I don't.
Is it a ground cover?
it's edible. It's not hard. It's not unattractive, but it just grows everywhere. That's the single worst one.
Wow.
But then hawkweed and a bunch of others that just will pop up everywhere.
Yeah. You know, you can get really crazy with trying to get rid of every single thing. And, you know, the things that are the annuals, like the little bulby things, I realize I'm never going to get them all. You know, I'm happy to get the big, the bulbs of, I have tulips. Well, that's another one. The lady who lived here 2 owners ago really liked tulips. So they're tulips that just pop up in random places. But, you know, those are easy enough dug out and transplanted. The Spanish bluebells, they have bulbs, maybe as big as almost as big as a golf ball on some of the mature plants. So they're pretty easy to get. And my neighbors like to have those. So I don't mind spreading those around. And I've kept some in large display pots. So I'll get some blue color. And then huh?
Stachy's floridana is
Stack-
Bethany's scientific
Yeah, that's the
name.
bet. Don't know that one. I don't know if we have any native stackies up here. I will look at that. Stachy's floridana. We'll see how far north that gets. That's not one I've come across on any of the native plant sites, but I'll look in the flora. Do you have a copy of that, Greg, Diane?
No.
Yeah.
No,
The online website is a lot easier to use than the PDF because it has a lot more photos. And it goes down into, you know, down deep into Florida. So that's good. All righty. Well, Laura, are we out of time here? How does
Yes,
that?
we are. We went a few minutes over. I think we're any further last thoughts? Hope to see our chapter members next month, December, for our holiday virtual celebration.
And if you have any questions, best way to contact me is through my email. The link here is to my online photo gallery, where you'll see lots of photos of native habitats and native plant material, native animals too.